But there's the element that this faction of people, which is a faction of anarchism, which are now branding themselves. And I mean, they've pushed me into traffic and said, and I said, where's the cops? And they went, there are no cops, Andrea, you are in Antifa land. So they're branding themselves as Antifa. But don't take that away from me, that as though I'm pro-fascism. But so it's important to kind of understand that these labels mean something to somebody, and they're widely used for propaganda purposes. How do I know that this Antifa exists, quote unquote, is by way of, well, they label themselves that way. They have stickers, they have mantras, they have direct actions that they do to protest ICE or protest cops or protest Christian rallies or protest me. I mean, can you believe it? I've had these black bloc wearing helmet, mask, bear spray mask, brass knuckle glove wearing people come to my litter picks. This has been a while, but they started out saying, well, who are you to say how you know how to help the homeless? And they linked arms and tried to block me from helping the homeless because I was approaching it with more accountability. And they don't like accountability, or pardon me, they don't like empowerment. When you use words that sound superior, oh, empowerment, that's a naughty word because like you're trying to get them to do something for something. And that's when my day of destiny happened with them, where I knew they were a real organization or a real ism, a real ideology that parks are on stolen land, homeless can stay wherever they want, live and let live. Nobody comes to your house, Jason, and says, do you need help with your garbage? Like, I don't knock on your door and say, hey, dude, I think you need a couple garbage bags. Why is there drug paraphernalia all over here? They were trying to make it sound like I was literally knocking on some suburban home in a cul-de-sac, asking them if they want garbage and dental work. So it was very bizarre. How is the Homeless Inc. funding Antifa? This is a very hot headline right now, sweeping the nation. They're funding them not through paycheck, but through ideology. They're using their platforms as incubation tanks to perpetuate the revolution. How do they do that? If you go into many, many, many of the nonprofits, and I've seen it for more than probably almost 10 years now, because I started seeing it even before We Heart. It's when you go into a food distribution center and their entire boardroom has training materials on how to identify a white supremacist. I'm like, I thought you guys distributed pears, right? So they're using their nonprofit, and we should all be identifying white supremacists, don't get me wrong. But then and there's more genders than there are stars. And here's how you can get involved for maybe this piece of lobbying, like, allowing boys and girls sports. They're being used to fight the revolution. And it's been something I've seen, and why they don't like what I'm doing, because I'm poking my nose into a place and I'm a tattletale. I'm like, hey, why aren't you guys doing anything about helping this homeless person actually reach self-sufficiency? Well, they don't believe in self-sufficiency. They don't believe it should be upon me or anybody to say, I don't think you should do drugs. Instead, we're saying, here's the methamphetamine pipe and the foil to do the drugs together that will kill you, because you're a drug addict and you're a person too. And so it's just all of this like ideology that's anti-structure, anti-authority, anti-leader, anti-brand. And they're using the nonprofit space to, again, help realize their mission, which is a stateless society.
Is there anything out there, like a website or anything that says, this person is the director of Antifa, this person is involved, or anything like that?
No, because that's the antithesis of their ism, which is there is no leader. There is no in charge. So it infiltrates in a lot of different ways. Like there's this thing called ads. I'd have to look at it again. Let me see if I can find it. But see if I can find. There are websites that sell material like how to protest violently and not get caught, how to buy the stickers that say, guilty when masked. Because like when I was attacked with people who had masks on, I reported it to the police. The investigator called me and said, well, we don't know who they are. So sorry, you got assaulted, but there's nothing we can do. So it infiltrates through bookstores. It infiltrates through nonprofits. Different mutual aid groups have website. It's called Adbusters, Adbusters Media Foundation. So you would go to adbusters.org, and in Adbusters, it's all the instructions of how to, protest, how to be an anarchist, t-shirts, so there's these kind of fringe websites that have stuff like that. And that's what makes it for interesting conversations. Like, is it real? It's sort of,
yeah, I'm all for protests and stuff.
Yeah.
But then I saw one time I happened to look at a wall, whatever, had a sign there, get paid at protest, $30 an hour, right? I said, well, I had no idea people got paid at protest, right? And it kind of fucked me up, right? Like, so these people, are they really protest and believe in the cause? They doing it because they're getting paid,
I mean, I've seen Craigslist ads that said, we're protesting and there's stipends. Maybe it's a $50 gift card. Maybe it's food. Maybe it's shirts and stickers and propaganda and flyers to hand out. But, do I have direct evidence that there was, there's a bank account that goes from here to here? I think it's very different. I think it's in forms of other compensation. But
yeah. So let's talk about social media. It seems to me like you do a really good job of putting yourself out on social media, X, LinkedIn, that stuff. Well, why is it so important for you to be active on social media?
Well, it's important to be on social media. I particularly grew my volunteer base through Facebook. It's very community driven. There's a lot of retired people that are still hanging on to Facebook. I always say I have so many moms on Facebook. They all like my stuff and cheer me on. But it is a great way to create events and then add people to events, and then you can show your before and after pictures. And that was very powerful to show that work. And while, nothing to totally brag about, but we have, 8,000 followers now on Facebook, a couple thousand on Instagram, and a few thousand on X. And I haven't, I don't buy very many ads. I think you can even buy followers on Instagram. So sometimes, you kind of always got to ask, like, what's a legit following and what's not. But it helps coalesce, right? And some of the first advice I got in 2020 from somebody, spare the details, but I was like, what do you mean? How do I kind of change the political landscape? How do I make voters aware that we need to vote differently on homeless policy or drug policy? And he said, you have to coalesce. And I was like, Bob, how do I do that? He goes, well, you have to have a direct action, like picking up trash. That's how you bring people together. And then you get the media involved, media. And so, started my Facebook page, and then I don't wait for Como, Cairo, Fox 13, King 5 to call me if I have a story, if it's Earth Day or noteworthy that we cleaned up a homeless camp because we got 3 people triaged to treatment or tickets home. We'll call them and tell about that story, or we'll call them about a story where people are constantly being swept around the corner and we're really not solving the problem, which then opens up for policy discussion. So it really allows people to see for their own eyes. And I'm a middle of the road, I've been calling myself a middle-aged woman lately, and people are like, don't say that. I was like, okay, fine, whatever. I am 50 years old, but I'm, I don't really feel like calling myself your girl next door. People at first were also like, you're a Karen, all that. And I'm like, I'm a volunteer. I volunteered for 28 months. I helped, I picked up the trash as my means to find my own truth. And social media, I would not be here today without podcasts, and also being on podcasts that, maybe you're not aligned with. Like, God help me when Tucker Carlson calls me, because that's when my mom cuts me out of the will, But my friend Jenny Burton was actually on his podcast just yesterday, and she spent 30 minutes with him talking about her platform, which is, hey, I was a 17-time convicted felon. I was a drug addict for 30 years. I finally got arrested for the last time at 40, and I was done. But it was law enforcement and intervention. And now she has one of the most effective prison reform programs in the state, if not country. And so she's kind of an emerging hometown hero. So Jenny should come on your show sometime. But she needs to get her word out. Fox and Friends called me very early on. I was like, I wouldn't mind being on CNBC and CNN. And now I'm on News Nation, or, Fox 13, or Como versus King versus Cairo, or gosh, it'd be nice to get a KUOW bit, or a PBS Cascade Party had me on eventually. But what happened with We Heart and me was the conservative podcast, you know, your Ari Hoffmans, your Jason Rants, my friend Brandy, you know, who's down the middle, but she's ranting and raving on the Democrats right now and putting herself out there, you know, having voted for Trump. And that's fine that she's doing her.